your neighbor, your family members, and together we contribute towards a safe, open, and trusted internet and digital space through capacity building and knowledge sharing. This is only possible if we all actively participate in our own way to play a role in this. We gladly noted that the government of Eswatini is taking the lead in internet governance issues in Eswatini and has opened the dialogue and called for volunteers from the various stakeholder groups to get involved and be part of the Eswatini multi-stakeholder advisory group. There will be discussions later in this webinar. For the last 3 days, we discussed wide internet governance related issues in Eswatini through the chat rooms, discussion forums, and the 2 webinars we held on Monday and yesterday. Some of the key highlighted issues included affordability. Is this affecting penetration? Probably that is some of the issues and the questions the policymakers need to start asking themselves. Accessibility and inclusion. Are we carrying everyone along? Do we have people in the rural areas? Do we have those who are enabled differently, like the deaf, the blind? How are we catering for their needs in the digital space? In relation to relevant content, again, it came quite a lot that while people want to get into the internet, they want to get real content that can affect their lives. The Universal Service Obligation Fund, being administered by the Eswatini Communications Commission, is actively addressing some of the challenges mentioned above. Other issues that worth considering in African continent could be cyber security and cyber hygiene gaps that was made and magnified by the COVID-19, where everybody has been forced to be online. Pupils, teachers, and parents, particularly in the rural areas, were seen as special interest groups to be considered. These continue being discussed in our discussion groups, in our chats, that we need to include this particular group of people. Most importantly, we need to involve women and the youth in the field of digital space, in particular in cyber security. It is the only way we can safeguard our future in this cyberspace that we have to be part of. We have a session addressing critical internet governance issues this afternoon, where issues shall be elaborated, and we encourage all of us to engage and ensure our issues and our concerns are taken into account. In conclusion, it is evident from our interactions this week that the government of Eswatini is working closely with the stakeholder groups to ensure that all are involved in internet governance. Governance of the internet in an open and transparent manner is key for the government of Eswatini to be effective and efficient in serving its people with shared responsibility and accountability. It's also key for the industries and business to create jobs and improve the economy, and ultimately for the citizens of Eswatini to progress their diverse livelihoods in a productive and responsible way. So all of us, we need to be involved, and we are glad that this has started in Eswatini with the School of Internet Governance, and we look forward to more people learning through the course that we made available. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Siya Bonga. I now invite Mr. Loazi Mazia, the Manager Technology and Standards at ESCOM, to moderate the opening session and invite keynote speakers. Mr. Mazia, kindly take the floor.
Thanks, Margaret. I'm not sure if our keynote speaker has joined the forum yet, but good morning, everyone. Welcome to this inaugural IGF convened in the Kingdom of Eswatini. As Margaret has said, my name is Loazi Mazia. I'm from the Eswatini Communications Commission. I will serve as your moderator for this session. Because the PS hasn't joined, I think we'll just continue with the program until he joins the forum. At this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Mokhtar Yedali, the head of telecommunications and postal at the African Union Commission, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, everyone. It's actually very hard to follow the nice speech and remark made by Dr. Margaret. I will try to emulate and see if I could do better. With that, thank you for giving me this opportunity really to speak at this opening session for the Eswatini Internet Governance Forum. And I will just start by saying something very important, that I would like to congratulate all of you, to congratulate all the graduates and specifically the organizers, the experts, those who has contributed directly or indirectly to make this School of Internet Governance really very successful. And we hope that the IGF itself, the national IGF itself, will be more successful than the School of Internet Governance. Because the matter is very important, and as you certainly have noticed, we live in the digital era, or what we so call the fourth industrial revolution, in which the information and communication have become the driving force for the human progress. It is the most powerful and also the most tangible tool to exploit the resultant opportunities, and also it is of our generation the luck and responsibility really to shape this era as much as we could. The COVID-19 has just confirmed the trend, and what also can be expected, which is really the transformative power of the ICTs. The intensive use of ICTs across all socioeconomic development, or so-called digitalization, is really the catalyst of for Africa to leapfrog into the 21st century, allowing our continent to really to realize its aspirations set in the AU Agenda 2063 and the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goal. The only thing we can say today is the future in the heart of our economies and our life is in the internet. More than ever, we need ICTs and internet for monitoring the progress and the evolution of the pandemic among people, and in each zone and each area. We need to keep in touch with our people, those ones that cannot travel or cannot see us. We need to our colleagues whom we are working. And this is the first time actually that there's a shift in culture, because the IGFs and national IGFs has been always physical presence organization. Today we organize them everything online, to the point that in preparing the budget of 2021, our officials from the AU have decided that aiming to make all our meetings virtual. And they also, the officials are also making our all meetings virtual. To say that, really to emphasize on the fact that the future of our internet is actually really, the future of our lives are really in the internet. The internet's critical infrastructure and resources are to be protected really. And as you certainly know, that Africa and most of the developing countries are using and retrieving important information using infrastructure that is most of the time outside of the country. The internet now security has become a challenge. And have you certainly seen that most of the Western leaders have evoked an image of mass disaster should a cyber attack to wreck the nation transportation systems and so on. And as Dr. Margaret has really emphasized on the issue of cybersecurity. The internet now is becoming, how can I say, the battle for ideologies and so on. And we see the metaphor of the Cold War. The US is probably one of the #1 superpower, really leading the internet and using it, as much as they could. The internet has moved from really the technical era to the diplomatic area. The battle for internet governance now has become a subject that all of us need to be involved on. The internet is, its governance is actually being contested here and there by different blocks, the Eastern blocks, the China blocks, OECD countries block. Everybody has an opinion how this internet governance need to be really set up and conducted for the benefit of all. This is why it is very important for Africa really voices to be heard. And this is why we come up with the project PRIDA, and part of it is really to build the African capacities in internet governance. Our plan was to have for each and every country to have their national governance, to have regional internet governance forums, and to make sure that our diplomats and our officials are well trained and understand the stake and the challenges that are facing the internet governance, and to be able to contribute to the international discussions and debates on the matter of internet governance. So the global dialogue on internet governance and policy issues needs really to be really understood by the African leadership. And this is why we are welcoming this National Internet Governance Forum and the contribution and the participation of all Eswatini people and experts. With those small remarks, I would like again to reiterate my congratulations to all of you for having this event happening. And I wish you really a successful National Internet Governance Forum. And on behalf of all the African Union Commission, my team would like to thank you for the responsiveness and specifically your contribution to having these different events very successful. With that, I will hand it over to you and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Yedeli, for those opening remarks. I think you've emphasized on the point that as Africa, we need to let our voices heard in the international discussions and forums and the way the internet is used. I think that's very important for us, and that's why we have this forum today. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Stephen Fox from the European Union to give his remarks.
Good morning, and thank you very much. And in fact, this will be our colleague Luis Miguel from the EU delegation to Eswatini, who will deliver the opening remarks on our side. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, Miguel.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Luis.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Andreas Dlamini, Director of Communications in the Ministry of ICT and PRI, the focal point. Mr. Sakil Dlamini, Senior Communications Engineer in the Ministry of ICT. Mr. Mokhtar Yedali, Head of the Information Society Division of the African Union Commission. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Luis Miguel Pascual. I am the Program Officer for Private Sector Development, Business Climate, Sustainable and Inclusive Growth in the European Union delegation to Eswatini. And I'm also the headquarters focal point to digitalization at the delegation. Let me highlight three main messages in these short opening remarks. First, these are certainly very specific and challenging times. We first and foremost hope your families and relatives are safe and taking care of themselves in these circumstances. The COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented challenges and impacts in the short term, but certainly in the long term, globally and across all sectors, in particular in the digital areas, including, for instance, on governance, on delivery of public services, on working methods, as well as new ways for conducting businesses or diplomacy. Digital technologies and data play a key role in that context. The European Union, acting as Team Europe, took a comprehensive and decisive action to tackle the disruptive impact of COVID-19. Together with our member countries, we are adapting priorities and programs to address the crisis. Second, digital economy transformation is high on the agenda of the European Union, African Union cooperation. It featured high in the last African Union EU summit in 2017, also in the Africa-Europe Alliance for Sustainable Investments and Jobs, launched end of 2018, and with the works of a specific Africa-Europe Digital Economy Task Force, the DETF, which delivered its final report in June 2019 to guide our cooperation further. Following the European Green Deal, the European Commission also presented in March a new comprehensive strategy with Africa. It proposed to intensify cooperation through partnerships in 5 key areas, among which digital transformation. It will most certainly feature very high in the scope of the next EU-African Union Summit, expected to take place in October 2020. We can also commend the African Union for the adoption in February of its digital transformation strategy 2020-2030. As you certainly know, on the European Union side, we are also currently preparing our budget and cooperation for the next 7 years, what we call the MFF 2021-2027. And this is, of course, a key moment to materialize the priorities of our cooperation. Third, congratulations to Eswatini for this first National Internet Governance Forum. And congratulations to the African Union Commission for helping in the organization with support of the PRIDA, which stands for Policy and Regulation Initiative for Digital Africa. One key action of the cooperation between the EU and the African Union. Internet governance is one of the 3 components of this initiative, with the objective to strengthen the African voice in the global debate and to contribute to making African issues a priority, which in turn has the potential to make global internet policies and rules more appropriate to the African context. The European Union is also working proactively to ensure transparent and inclusive representation mechanism in global internet governance fora. Why? Because we are convinced that it is necessary for the internet governance debate to remain multi-stakeholder in nature and to ensure transparent mechanism of representation. The approach taken by the African Union Commission with the PRIDA support is also multi-stakeholder from the national, regional, and continental level, with various stakeholders in the IG value chain taking responsibility of various activities and being accountable for the outcomes. We are therefore very pleased to support the organization of this first National Internet Governance Forum in Eswatini, which should help promoting the voice of Eswatini at various levels. We congratulate Eswatini for being the 2nd country under the PRIDA support to take the School of Internet course that started on Monday the 27th, with learners still accessing the learning material for the next week. It is commendable for the course. It's commendable that the course has 40 active participants from Eswatini, cutting across the public, private, academia, civil society, and the media sectors. Finally, I wish to warmly thank the African Union Commission and the PRIDA technical assistants for their efforts to support the organization of this IGF. I also wish to warmly thank and congratulate again the representatives of the Eswatini government, and to finally thank all the participants for joining this meeting. With these words, let me finish here and wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis, for those remarks. We do appreciate and thank the EU for the support that they're giving to the African Union and by extension to the Kingdom of Eswatini on this PRIDA initiative. We are very grateful for the support. I think we can all that the 4th Industrial Revolution is driven by one critical element, which is internet connectivity. Devices, applications, standalone tools, and have no applicable functions on their own. They need to be connected to deliver on their full potential and functionality. And by association, you understand that connectivity basically means internet, which is on a high level the global system of computer networks that communicates with each other. Innately, there are different actors that form part of the internet ecosystem as users. We have the end users, governments, business, civil society, technical. All these actors have differing requirements and needs on how to use the internet. The Kingdom of Eswatini is no exception. And depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on, whether technically, business, or politically oriented. The necessity to address the differing views on managing the internet is what brought the convening of this IGF in the kingdom. The matter of how the internet is governed is a critical one, and how we manage this precious global resource directly impacts our economic and social opportunities far into the future. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter in the context of internet governance, who will offer some reflections on the importance of internet governance. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Executive of the Eswatini Communications Commission, Mr. Mvilawe Dlamini.
Thank you, Mr. Zia. I trust everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Basically, the internet is increasingly significant in our lives, and our reliance on the internet is inevitable. In fact, we can no longer imagine a world without the internet. It continues to evolve organically, but it has already assumed its position as a ubiquitous tool for communication anywhere on our planet. It will be 30 years next year when I first accessed the net, and I never imagined it would grow to what it is today. The internet should actually be a safe, secure, open, and enabling environment for everyone, without discrimination on gender, race, color, language, religion, belief, or political belief. We must all be able to exercise our fundamental freedoms, whether online or offline, including the right to private life and the protection of personal data. People should be protected from online crime and from unlawful surveillance of their activities. The citizens of the world should be free to communicate without censorship or other interference. And they should feel free to share their personal data, creating content and participating in online activities such as trading, purchasing, etc. And that is why we need internet governance, which talks to shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of the internet, as per the Working Group of Internet Governance of 2005. It also talks to the rules, policies, standards, and practices that coordinate and shape cyberspace, be it national or international. And the key issue with internet governance is its impact on access, quality, development, safety, and security, as well as prudent management of the internet. We need to open data while protecting our privacy, and internet governance plays a crucial role in making sure the playing field stays as equal as possible for all. We can all agree that the more people are able to use the internet, the more we'll be able to draw from our collective.
Can you come in, Mr. Mazia? It looks like we've lost Mr. Dlamini.
Okay, thanks. Okay. In the meantime, while waiting for Mr. Dlamini to reconnect and join us, I think we touch on a very important points, including inclusiveness, data protection, cybersecurity. and the shared principles on how we, as stakeholders, we need to use the internet. I think it's very important as a country to start the debate on how we want the internet environment to function in the country. I'm glad we have more than 50 participants here today, which is a very good indication. It shows the interest the people of Eswatini have in this subject. And we appreciate all of you for honoring the invitation and being part of this forum. Mr. Dlamini is back. Ngos, you can continue.
I'm not sure where I lost everyone. In any case, let me just proceed with, why we need internet governance. Basically, we need to open data while protecting our privacy, and internet governance plays a crucial role in making sure the playing field stays as equal as possible for all mankind. We can agree that the more people are able to engage with the internet, the more we'll be able to draw from our collective intelligence. That cannot be achieved through censorship, fragmentation, and erosion of net neutrality. Internet governance ensures that the internet as a national and global resource is secure, stable, resilient, and trustworthy. It promotes strong cooperation among different stakeholders to effectively address risks and threats to security and stability of the internet. Internet governance ensures that rights that people have offline are also protected online, in accordance with international rights, legal obligations, including the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, and economic, social, and cultural rights. These rights include freedom of expression, freedom of association, privacy that people have offline must also be protected online, including the right to privacy, of avoiding arbitrary and unlawful collection of personal data, and surveillance, and the right of the protection of law against such interference. Accessibility, talking to persons with disabilities should also enjoy full access to online resources on an equal basis with the rest of us. Freedom of information and access to information, where people should have rights to access, share, create, and distribute information on the internet. All people have a right to development, and the internet has a vital role to play in helping to achieve the full realization of internationally agreed sustainable development goals. It is therefore a vital tool for giving people living in poverty the means to participate in their development process. Also need to make sure that the internet is preserved as a fertile and innovative environment based on open system architecture with voluntary collaboration, collective stewardship, and participation, recognizing technical management principles for efficient and improved network operation, and preserving the end-to-end nature of the network, equal technical treatment of all protocols and data delivered by the underlying communications, and seeking to resolve technical issues at a level closest to their origin. It should also present an enabling environment to actually work, the ability. Can you still hear me?
Yes, you say audible.
The ability to innovate and create has been at the heart of the remarkable growth of the internet, and it has potential to bring great value to the national and global society, and internet governance issues ensures that through an enabling internet environment. Internet governance promotes open standards and is informed by individual and collective expertise and practical experiences and decisions made by open consensus that allow for a unique, interoperable, resilient, stable, decentralized, secure, and interconnected network available to all. It ensures that the standards are consistent with human rights and allow development and innovation. The internet is never going to be a finished product. Design principles and technological decisions taken and implemented back in the 60s, such as packet switching, open standards, interoperability, remain embedded within the internet's architecture to this very day. However, this does not mean the decision taken today will not risk altering systems negatively in the long run. So we must be alert and engaged when making decisions on internet governance to ensure that the tool we dearly love and value remains open and accessible to all. The only way to do this is to ultimately begin to engage in multi-stakeholder forums like the Internet Governance Forum we're having today. Let us also be mindful that what we are doing today, we're doing for the youth, and they need not point at us to say we actually mess things up for them. With those few comments, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ngozi, for the presentation. I think there are a lot of take-home points that you've highlighted, and most importantly, that internet governance is a collective effort. So every stakeholder needs to be involved in shaping up their policies and regulatory instruments that will help govern the internet. So it's just a plea to everyone present here today that they shouldn't shy away in this debate. They should be visible and present when these debates take place. And we hoping for a better internet future for the kingdom of Eswatini. Thank you, Ngozi, for the presentation. At this point, I'd like to invite our next moderator, Ms. Tiniwe Fagutse, who's the Chief Customer Officer at Eswatini Mobile, to continue with the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mazia. And it's really been interesting to listen to all the speakers that have gone before us. Once again, it's my pleasure to be joining you in this inaugural IGF conference and session. And in this session that we're getting into, we are going to be speaking briefly to a topic that says the role of internet in the control of COVID-19. And we will delve specifically to the Eswatini case. There's two speakers that will take us through. The first speaker who I will invite immediately is Mr. Thulani Fagutse, who is the Technical Director at the Eswatini Communications Commission, the regulatory body responsible for regulating communication sector in the kingdom. Over to you, Mr. Fagutse.
Good morning, colleagues and forum delegates. Thank you, Madam Moderator, for the introduction. And just for everyone's information, the moderator is also the secretary for the COVID-19 ICT committee, tasked with the responsibility of coordinating the sector's response to the pandemic. So she's very much clued on the issue and topic that you are discussing today. First of all, I would like to start by recognizing the organizers of this very important event and first of its kind, National IGF, particularly the Ministry of ICT, the African Union, ESCOM, and other partner organizations for putting the forum together. Distinguished participants, everyone will recall that the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini declared the COVID-19 pandemic as a national emergency, introducing a number of measures to control the spread of the disease, including partial lockdown in the country, closure of schools and institutions of higher learning, and requesting that most work activities are performed from home as well as online. The situation required that we adjust from our normal way of doing our day-to-day activities, with a lot of activities moving to online and digital platforms, working from home as well as learning and studying from home. During this difficult period, the internet has served as the bedrock of many of our day-to-day activities, with demand and usage of internet services in the country increasing by more than 50% in some cases between March, when the pandemic was declared a national emergency, to July 2020. This development and situation has required that all participants in the ICT sector through the COVID-19 ICT committee, the ministry, ESCOM, and operators to come up with initiatives to ensure that reliable quality internet and communication services are provided to all Eswatini to support what other people now call the new normal. Some of these initiatives and activities have not been probably directly related to the management and control of the pandemic, but rather to help the country to cope with the new normal. I will now speak to some of the initiatives and activities that have been worked on to try and deal with the current situation. The first one, and which the committee the ICT committee on COVID-19 that it looked at, was requesting and requiring that all service providers in the country establish and activate business continuity plans during the emergency period. This was meant to ensure continued service availability at all times, as communication services were considered essential during this period. Operators and service providers were required to submit these business continuity plans to ESCOM. Another initiative that was done and looked at was the provision of additional radio frequency spectrum on a temporary basis to all service providers who needed this resource to provide additional capacity and improve quality of services. You will note, forum participants, that as an example, in mobile services, capacity and quality issues can be addressed by rolling out network infrastructure, which requires time and capital investments to deal with, or providing additional spectrum resources. So the country chose to go with the latter, which is providing additional frequency spectrum to try and deal with the current situation. Additionally, service providers were encouraged to put in place measures to ensure that sufficient capacity is made available. Effective quality monitoring strategies are put in place, all meant at ensuring that there's continued service availability by telecommunication service providers. This being done with the understanding that a lot of activities and will now be taking place online. So it was important that communication services are of the highest quality. During this period also, a lot of activities and focus has been around cybersecurity awareness, because we do appreciate and understand that now there's a lot of activities taking place online, and with that comes with the added risk of cybercrime. So the focus on the awareness part was just to make the public aware and sensitize them that they need to be vigilant as they use online platforms and digital platforms just to protect themselves and the rest of the country. One of the other key initiatives that the committee and the country looked at was how can we as a country support home study and online learning. In this regard, free access was provided through zero rating to educational websites for schools and institutions of higher learning. I have a few examples here. MTN Educare, which is a platform that is being used for educational content for secondary and high school going children. There is also Moodle that was zero rated by some of the service providers, including also where it would not be possible to zero rate some of these platforms. Service providers were encouraged to at least provide additional capacity or additional bandwidth quotas for their subscribers so that at least they are able to access these additional platforms. One of the other key areas that the committee and the country looked at was data protection and privacy. And in this regard, guidelines were developed on the sharing of location data on contact tracing platforms to ensure adequate protection of personal data and information. I can report that the NDMA, working together with the COVID-19 ICT committee, developed a contact tracing application that is meant to try and deal with some of the issues in as far as the management of cases, COVID-19 cases are concerned. We can confirm that, and we are all aware that we are as a country seeing an increasing number of cases. So the committee then came up and looked at how can ICT help in as far as the management of the cases is concerned, and hence the development of this application or platform. There are quite a number of other initiatives, colleagues, that are being looked at and that were worked on, and I'm sure my colleague from EPTC, Mr. Francis, will talk into. I must say, though, in conclusion, that while COVID-19 has had devastating effects to the economy and social fabric, it has also presented the ICT sector in the country and globally the opportunity to demonstrate the true value of ICT services, the internet and digitization. This is the time for participants in the ICT and telecommunications sector to appeal to the country's citizens that ICT services, particularly the internet, can bring about the much needed socio-economic development. With that, those few remarks, I think that those would be my comments on probably how the country has tried to use ICT services to deal with the current COVID-19 situation. Thank you, Program Director. I will hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fagutse. Can you please not go, because we would like to then engage. I'm sure that the attendees are aware that they can actually send questions if they have any questions to any of the presenters. But you've touched on a lot of crucial points that I'm certain that we would like to then interrogate. But let's hold the interrogation for after we hear from Mr. Francis Dlamini. He is the GM Technical at Eswatini Post and Telecommunications. He is also a sitting member of the ICT subcommittee. And from Mr. Dlamini, we will hear the perspective of how internet has come in the control and fight for COVID-19 from an operator's perspective. Over to you, Mr. Dlamini. Francis Dlamini, over to you, sir.
Yes, I was muted. The host did not unmute me. Thank you, program coordinator, and good morning to all participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. As Guniwe has rightly introduced me, I'm the General Manager, Technology, Eswatini Telecoms, one of the operators within the Kingdom of Eswatini. I'm not too sure whether you are aware that we have 2 mobile operators and 1 fixed line operator. Eswatini Telecoms is the incumbent fixed line operator. I am doing this presentation on behalf of my MD, my managing director, Mr. Petros Dlamini, who unfortunately could not be in attendance today. Mr. Petros Dlamini is actually the chairperson of the ICT task team, COVID-19 task team, and he had requested me to do this presentation. The brief he had given me was basically to look at what operators in total, all operators are doing in response to the issues that are coming up with respect to the COVID-19 issue, pandemic. And I just want to go briefly through those. And one of the major ICT interventions that we have seen is that operators have increased network capacity for data connectivity. This basically has been caused by the fact that the main source of connectivity now is more in the residential areas rather than in the CBDs, because people have been moving away from their normal workstations and they're working from home. So some of the operators have had to upgrade some of the equipment or the network that they have in the residential areas. The other thing that has happened is that some operators have actually doubled the customer subscribed capacity. I think this also goes to talk. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kosi.
Yeah, some operators have actually doubled their customer subscribed capacity. This also goes to talk to the point that was raised by an earlier speaker, I think in terms of the costing, what it costs for to access the internet. It's always been said that data costs in Eswatini are pretty high. So this was also meant to try and address that issue. We've also increased international internet connectivity capacity. Between February and July this year, 2020, I think we have increased international internet connectivity capacity by close to 40%, if not more. So because we've seen an increase in internet connectivity. The other issue, of course, for us is that for most of the content, we still have to leave the country, which is something that I think sitting together with the other operators and SECOM and ECOM, we need to see how we can make sure that that doesn't happen, specifically by utilizing the IXP that we have through the African Union. We've also reduced internet connectivity pricing. Basically, that talks to the point that I was talking to, where we've doubled customer subscribe capacity, we've increased customers' download speeds, effectively reducing the pricing because we don't increase the price. As Mr. Tulane Fagusa was saying just now, we've also launched a mobile contact tracking and tracing application. Tracking in terms of contacts can be anything from a suspect or a patient who's already presenting symptoms, or a suspect or a contact. So we trace and we track the contacts or the suspects or the patients. I'll just briefly go into a bit more detail on that. And I'd really like, as EPTC, to extend our appreciation to Real Image, whose developers have come up. Mr. Ali Rasting, I think he's also in the meeting, whose developers have come up with this contact tracing and tracing application. We've also launched last week the Eswatini Wireless, a couple of weeks ago, Eswatini Wireless Broadband Project, which is a project being undertaken by the Minister of ICT in collaboration with the ITU to provide internet access to schools in predominantly rural areas. There's about 20 base stations that will be going live before the end of September. There's already one base station that is live. This would be internet access that will be given free of charge to the schools. They will also be given, this project will also give internet access to Tinkhundla centers. It will also give internet access to health centers and clinics in predominantly rural areas that would be covered by the 20 base stations. I just want to go briefly into just some detail on the contact tracing and tracking application that Real Image and Ali Rasting and his team have come up with. And the solution has some core functions. It's a web-based screening and suspect registration platform. It can access multiple data sets, sources for quicker suspect profiling, that is to come up with the contact tree in terms of who you could have possibly contacted, your family, your workplace, your workmates, your social contacts. It has a mobile check-in, which the suspect has to do at set intervals, and it can be automated or manual. And it sends live local updates to a control center map. And you'll see why that is important, because those live local location updates will then be used, because we can then create a virtual geofence for each quarantine suspect, so that notifications or warnings are given out as soon as a suspect steps out of that geofence or misses a check-in. It has also automated SMS and USSD check-in reminders to suspect. We've already actually had a pilot that has been successfully conducted with the Ministry of Health. And if I'm not mistaken, we should have gone live sometime this week with actual suspects and patients and contacts that we are going to be tracking and tracing. And with those few words, I think that from our side is what we're doing as operators. And mind you, I'm not talking, this is not a talk from the EPTC perspective, this is from the operator's perspective, being all operators, your mobile operators, fixed line operator, and your ISPs, by the way, because they also have their own customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dlamini. A very clear and precise presentation. At this point, honorable participants, please allow me to change the program a bit and allow the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of ICT, Mr. Maxwell Masuku, to deliver his opening address. And thereafter, we shall come back and have a short session of discussions on the presentations we've just received. We welcome you, PS. And at this point, can I officially hand over to you, sir, to give us your opening address?
Thank you, Program Director, and may I greet everyone in the meeting. may I take this opportunity to highlight a few things, but let me first recognize those present, especially Mr. Mwakayede, African Union's Head of Telecommunication Division, Mr. Adil Suleiman, African Union Senior Policy Officer, Telecom and ICT, Dr. Nyambura Margaret, you'll pardon me of the pronunciations, please. Internet Governance Expert Technical Assistance to Prade, Ms. Belen Tesfaye, Mrs. Hanane Wijemi, Dr. Bridget, all from PRIDA. Sponsors of the PRIDA project, the EU especially, our local sponsor, ESICOM, panelists, moderators, and rapporteurs, all participants and stakeholders present. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, I want to express my appreciation to the African Union Commission and the European Union for their joint initiative supporting countries to establish schools of internet governance and national internet governance forums, including our Kingdom of Eswatini through the PRIDA project. Today, we are having our first internet governance forum, having been preceded by the first school of internet governance in Eswatini. And this marks a great milestone for our country, thanks to PRIDA. The outbreak of COVID-19 has prompted us to conduct the two internet governance processes virtually, though it would have been more fulfilling to have interacted face-to-face with our sponsors and stakeholders. However, this is also a blessing in disguise because it has made us leverage and practicalize the digital dividends offered by the internet. The hosting of the first school of internet governance in the Kingdom of Eswatini since the beginning of the week marks a great landmark in the internet governance process. The School of Internet Governance brought together different stakeholder groups, including women and youth. We, however, need to further diversify the participation in future rounds to also include those with disabilities. Feedback from the Eswatini School of Internet Governance informs that there was broad support for the notion that as the internet and other technologies continue to evolve, better coordinated digital governance systems are needed to maximize the opportunities offered by the technologies and address the challenges they bring in a systematic approach. There was also a wider consensus on the need to prioritize universal access, digital literacy, inclusion, and affordability of broadband for Eswatini. I believe that these contributions will come as an input to this national IGF today as well. I want to believe the IGF, by its multi-stakeholder nature, will bring the transparency and inclusiveness and so allow stakeholders to reflect critically on existing internet governance issues and contribute to the shaping of future processes. I dare believe that this new platform, our national IGF, will provide a better feedback and input mechanism to the development of policies relating to the internet governance in the Kingdom to the benefit of all. We wish to thank ESCOM for sponsoring the two forums and more specifically for funding the participation of tertiary students in form of data packs. Lastly, I would like to thank the presence and participation of all stakeholders here, representing their respective sectors, which are all important in the internet governance ecosystem. May I end by wishing you a successful forum culminating into resolutions that will ensure the future of the internet. And with these words, I wish to declare this forum officially open. I thank you, Program Director. And with that little intervention, I wish for the rest of the day, by the end of it, we would have come with the resolutions that would surely promote what we set out to do, and also bridge the digital divide within the country. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. That was the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of ICT, Babe Masugo. Thank you for your speech, for your words of wisdom. And I believe, PS, at this point, we were in a session that was looking at the role of internet in the control of COVID-19. So some of the questions you are equally posing have come from some of the attendees. Back to you, Mr. Fagotse Tulani and Francis Lamini. We have two questions that have come from attendees that I would like for you to attend to. The first one is from Nontobego Shongwane. Nontobego says, an amazing job on the contact tracing app. How do you ensure and assure data protection and privacy for the civil society whilst tracking their location? That's the first question. And another question from Sive is, I think the network coverage is an urgent issue for concern. There is a huge gap between rural and urban schools in particular, and that speaks to e-learning. Can I throw it over to you, Tulani and Francis, to attend to those two comments and questions?
Thank you, Zinewe, and the participants for the question. I will try to answer some of the first one probably in full and partly try to address the second one. The issue of data protection and privacy, in as far as the contact tracing application is concerned, was one of the key issues that was looked at when this concept was being looked at and developed. So data privacy was really one of the central issues that the committee and the developers looked at. What we then did was to develop directives on how the data is going to be used in a manner that seeks to promote or protect personal information. These directives and guidelines, they really focus on the key principles of data protection, which include ensuring that the data that is being collected is used only for the purposes for which it was collected. And then built into that would be a checking mechanism to make sure that that data is then not used for other things. You would note that someone can be a contact today, and then in a month's time, they are no longer a contact. In the guidelines, we have built in also a process to make sure that that information is somehow removed from the application so that it is only required for the period when the person is still a COVID-19 contact case. Otherwise, after the person has been cleared and all of that, there's no real use or need for the data to be there. So the guidelines are at a stage now with the legislative process, and we are expecting that the process would be completed soon and they will become a legislative document and then be used to make sure that people's personal data is protected. On the issue of where it is indicated that network coverage is an urgent issue, particularly the gap between rural and urban schools, you will note that it's not just from an internet point of view. What the committee and the country has looked at is to look at other platforms that can provide a relief or access to information for people or schools in rural areas. One of these really has been to use broadcasting services to try and close the gap, and a lot of efforts have been put in that direction just to make sure that a lot of people have got access to broadcasting services, including subsidizing some of the devices that are used for accessing or watching TV content, which we all know as set-top boxes. So the Commission, working together with the Ministry, has tried to reduce the pricing of set-top boxes so that they are available or affordable to a wider part of the population in the country. I think that those would be my two comments, and maybe Francis can add from an internet point of view.
Thank you, Tulani. Francis, sir, please, quite briefly, we are short, we're almost out of time.
Yeah, thanks, program coordinator. I think Tulane has basically touched on almost all of everything, especially with respect to the privacy issues around the data and data protection. On the coverage side, the projects that I even mentioned earlier in my presentation are actually meant to address some of the gaps in the rural areas. There are other projects, because of time, I did not even go into those. There are other projects that are being undertaken that are also addressing rural areas. There's some other companies that are doing projects to provide network coverage in the rural areas. ECOM also has a program, the Universal Service Obligation Program, that is aimed at providing funding to provide network coverage in areas where operators would basically say it would not be commercially viable for them to roll out network in that area. So those are the areas that are being touched on when it comes to trying to close the gap. The gap is there, we all know.
No, thank you very much, Nkosi. Thank you very much, Ndolo, for the presentations and addressing the questions. As we wrap up this session, what has become very evident is that internet access is a basic right now. It's not a luxury. And COVID-19 has actually brought that to the fore. We need to connect everyone, not just connecting. The PS spoke about digital literacy. There's a lot of work to be done to make sure that eMaSwati understand what benefits there are and then access the services that we are trying to provide via internet. And I think personally, to me, one of the benefits that I'm seeing is that as a country and as the ICT sector, there were many gains when we worked and collaborated to fight a common ill in society. And surely the deployment of artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things has come to show that we can solve many of our developmental challenges if we collaborate and work on the gains we've seen now as a kingdom and as a people. To the speakers, thank you very much for your contributions. At this point, please allow me to invite you all to a 10-minute comfort break. And thereafter, the next coordinator, Madam Pili Ngumalo, the GM Finance at the Central Bank, will then take forth at that point. At this point, do enjoy the health break, and thank you for joining us and listening.
Thank you, Qiniwe. That means we'll come back at 11:25. Ladies and gentlemen, shall I call everyone back to the forum? I hope we have been able to stretch a bit and maybe drink a cup of tea or smoke a cigarette or pray for those of us who pray. Let me at this juncture give this opportunity to the platform to Ms. Philile Nxumalo, the moderator of the next session, to carry on. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sakile, and hello and welcome back to all our attendees. As mentioned earlier, I am Philile Nxumalo. I am coming from the Central Bank of Eswatini. Before maybe we go into our discussion, I'd like to just thank the sponsors and conveners of this forum. It couldn't have come at a better time. I was just reflecting during the break that if anyone had asked me about internet governance 6 months ago, I might perhaps have spoken about issues of inclusion to drive economic growth and social development. But here we are 6 months into the year and deep into a pandemic that nobody would have anticipated before. And we've seen the internet playing a very key role in terms of the responses that we have had to come up with. We've heard ESCOM and EPTC talking about some of these, including contact tracing, including some of the interventions in the education space. And it's all very commendable, but perhaps it's a good point now to turn our focus to say, here is this internet that has become so ubiquitous to how we live, how we engage with the world, how we engage with our fellow human beings. What are the governance issues that we need to perhaps understand in this new way or in this new world where the internet is effectively everything, you know, that we rely on. And to assist us to have this discussion, we have Mr. Andreas Dlamini, Director Communications at Ministry ICT. And I'd like to perhaps hand over to him now to take us through perhaps what are some of these critical issues around the governance of internet that we need to start thinking about. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Philile. I'm sorry if by chance you happen to catch my last conversation to someone in the office. Otherwise, I want to say thank you to everybody for participating in this inaugural forum meeting for us to start our own National Internet Governance Forum. As a ministry, we are very excited about this, and as a country, it is a very important milestone, as the Principal Secretary has pointed out. Philile here wants me to talk to issues of critical internet governance. Perhaps the first question I can put forward is, where or what's the meaning of governance, or why do you need governance? Governance, in my own words, I would say it is talking to regulating conduct so that everybody conducts themselves appropriately, and should there be cases of breach of good conduct, then there should be some enforcement of some kind. So governance talks to issues of prescribing the way things should be done, and if they're not done that way, then what should happen? Now we're talking about the internet governance. I am not going to talk for long because I'm interested in us having a discussion around this issue rather than a presentation. Because I come from the ministry, so I come from the policy side of things. I do want to hear what the stakeholders expect from government, or in terms of direction of internet provision, internet service, internet conduct, good conduct when it comes to the internet, the applications that are there, social media, service provision, pricing, regulatory frameworks, policy, legislation that will talk to enforcing good conduct on the internet. So really, I'm looking forward to more of a discussion rather than a presentation coming from my side. But briefly, I can maybe talk to that before you have governance of anything or talk of anything, really, it's the infrastructure that brings that about before we can talk about internet provision or internet policies or internet whatever. The fundamental thing for us as a country is infrastructure. So really, the infrastructure to me is what generates a discussion around the internet. So infrastructure being the gateway, being the backbone, being the cross-border links, being the last mile to the customer, being the technical expertise of our engineers that are responsible for the internet, being enablers of the internet, like the IXP, like adopting protocols like the IPv6, coming to issues of pricing of the internet and the competition in the industry. So really, for me, is as I am covering this widespread, wide spectrum of the basic tenets of the internet, which is really the basic need being the infrastructure. And then we can have policies and all other things, but when we have the infrastructure, say we do have internet in the country, internet that is good to serve the people of the Kingdom of Eswatini. So in a nutshell, Madam Program Director, is that to say that it is a discussion that for me is the most important thing to sort of direct us as the ministry, as government, as to how to go about internet governance. The establishment of the National Internet Governance Forum will provide that venting platform for consumers, for stakeholders out there who are on the receiving end, the civil society, to voice or to give them a voice, to talk to policymakers, to talk to the operators, to talk to the regulator, talk to the market. So that is what I'm looking forward to, a discussion with our stakeholders. Want to end there, Madam Program Director. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dlamini. I think you rightly state that, this has got to be a discussion around this very critical issue. And perhaps to kickstart that discussion off, just a question of my own. Having, said that this is something that needs to evolve with the involvement of all the stakeholders, maybe you could touch briefly on who you see as some of your key stakeholders, perhaps an example of a few, and outline what you believe their role ought to be in developing an appropriate internet governance landscape.
Madam Moderator, the first stakeholder would be the provider, the service provider. It's the service provider that comes with investment to put infrastructure. And it's the service provider that promotes or markets the service that they provide and teach the consumer that here is a good service that will enhance your business operation. Here is, it will bring you convenience. It will bring information, the whole world into your small table or into your small box. That's the key stakeholder. First of all, it is the service provider. Then the second key stakeholder, it is the consumer, the customer, be it an individual customer, that is domestic customers, be it a business, because the operator will only offer services if there will be takers of the service. And they will be able to make investment as long as they see that they'll be able to make business. So the service provider and the customer are key stakeholders for me. Then as you expand the net, and then you come to the regulators, you come to the policymakers, you come to academia, you come to civil society that will be able to be some kind of a check against state overreach, civil society that will be able to be a check as well against business, when business becomes more powerful and sort of want to exert more profit from customers, from consumers. So we are all stakeholders. Then we've got academia. Academia comes as a stakeholder in that they lead in issues of research, in terms of information provision, in terms of content creation in one area, or providing, triggers here and there for everyone to take note of things that need to be taken care of.
Okay, thank you. And I think you've really hit the nail on the head when you say that your service providers are probably the first key stakeholder that you would talk about. And, you know, for me, this is very important because it leads us to the discussion around the cost. And that keeps coming up. In fact, I have a question that is touching on the cost of using the internet in urban areas versus the rural areas, what is being done to roll out network coverage in rural areas, etc. And for me, maybe part of the discussion has to cover how do we make sure that the provision of internet, you know, by the service providers comes at a cost that is still, you know, sort of accessible or affordable generally. Is there a role for the other stakeholders that you mentioned to provide that safeguard to make sure that the cost doesn't become in itself a barrier to inclusion?
Yeah, the issue of cost is really a very tricky one because it comes to issues of transparency. When the service provider tells you that I charge this much because it is the cost I pay for acquiring or for bringing this service to you, and you find yourself in an unfortunate position where you can't verify as to the correctness of what they say to you, that it is so expensive or it is at this cost because I pay so much to bring it to you. Whether it's bandwidth, getting it from upstream providers, whether it is the cost of rolling out the infrastructure, whether it is the cost, whether it is operational costs, because service providers have got, they also have to pay things like utilities, electricity, so that whatever transmitter station they have is an electricity cost that is involved there. So you find that, you know, when you bring all these different elements of cost in the chain of provide the service, and then they say, yeah, this is what we can, and that is where academia or civil society plays a big role in actually trying to come up with alternatives or come up with very innovative ways of countering whatever information the service provider tells consumers it's charging them to bring the service to them. However, the regulator has got a statutory mandate, as good as a statutory mandate to actually sit down with operators and demand transparency from operators in terms of their cost as to how did they come to a particular value for services that they can charge. And then it's a matter of how they argue their points, what information they provide to the regulator. So that is one way. But then another one is the market itself. The market itself being whether is it a monopoly? Is it a competitive market? A competition market? Things like that. They also add to whether it is self-regulating the price, that is in terms of if there's competition in the market, or it's the regulator that comes in to sort of put a bar as to how far or how high can prices rise and things like that, and then to mediate in when there's different operators, and probably because the thing is, competition alone does not bring prices down. You do have issues where the regulator has got to come in to prevent things like collusion, price fixing, and things like that, whereby the operators start to cheat the customer in some kind of way. So, but when you have this platform where anyone has got, you know, a role to play, and they do take that responsibility and play their role, it helps a lot in bringing, otherwise it's many different stakeholders that come to play to bring price to an acceptable level.
Okay, thanks. And I quite appreciate your answer around that. In fact, I'm hearing quite a bit about the role of the regulator in a sense. And it's interesting for me because the other part of that same question was around cybersecurity, i.e. what is being done to protect sort of innocent users from predators using the internet to defraud people and so on. And for me, this always brings to mind the fine balance between a regulator, you know, sort of playing a big role in regulating a certain market or an industry versus allowing it, you know, sort of to regulate itself in line with market forces and so on. It's an interesting balance. What would you say around this data protection issue? Because, you know, from a consumer perspective, the basic starting point is often, you know, we should be allowed to access anything and everything without any interference. But on the other hand, when something does go wrong, there's then an expectation that there should have been somebody monitoring, or there should have been a policy to protect them, etc. What would you say around this aspect?
Again, that's a very tricky one, Madam Moderator. Issues of privacy versus, should I say, transparency or state security, because that is where you find that there is that, whether it's state security or security. Because for personal information, everybody wants their privacy. It's a it's a human right. But should someone commit a crime, you want the state to be able to help you nail down that individual that committed a crime against you. So then it comes to a question then as to what tools then will the state use to be able to catch these people if people demand privacy on their personal information, on their personal data. Okay, for a long time in the country, we've not had a specific law to protect privacy. So it was just an issue of a basic human right rather than legislation in the country. It's only now that soon the ministry will be tabling a data protection bill in parliament, and which specifically spells out the requirements of data protection, of personal information protection. There's always that debate. Right now in Europe, they have implemented what they call these data protection regulations. They have GDPRs, they call them. These have got sort of a blanket protection to personal information. And then you have security and law enforcement agencies, whereby they have genuine interests to be able to investigate crimes that may be committed through the internet. Now, if these general data protection rules or regulations protect everyone's data, including the criminals' data, then it becomes very difficult, it becomes very hard for the law enforcers to be able to catch the criminals. It is a very difficult balance for everyone. It's not only law enforcers. There is also people that want to inquire. For instance, if there is a prospective investor coming into the country, you want to get certain information about them to be able to ascertain whether this is a genuine investor or whether it's something else. Now, you want to get information about them to be able to know whether you can go on and have a deal with them or not. But then when it comes to to personal information protection, it shields all that away from you, so that it gets to a point where really you just have to play the balance, try to push, but where you are pushed back, then you find another way around it if you can. But it is quite a tricky situation that unfortunately it looks like we have to find a way of living with.
Yes, and thank you very much. I think that's a very honest answer. It is it's a tricky question for a lot of regulators to answer in terms of where you draw the line between, you know, sort of what people believe to be their right versus their expectation when things do go wrong. And, you know, this is a great a point to sort of hand over to the next session, which is going to look at the data environment, inclusion and trust in a bit more detail. So I'd like to say thank you very much at this point to you, Mr. Dlamini, but if you will allow me to just sneak in one question that I got from our participants. Are there plans in place for ensuring that all government offices are networked by 2022? I know it's
yeah, quickly on that one. Yes, there are plans to network all government offices.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dlamini. I've had a really great time just understanding the thoughts around, you know, what are some of the issues. I have a very good takeaway around what some of the stakeholders might need to be doing to play their part in the evolution of internet governance in the country. And at this stage, I'll maybe refer back to the program director for the next session, which will be moderated by Mr. Mbongeni Mbingo. And thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ms. Ngumalo, for your session. I think that I wanted to check briefly if we are moving on to me or we're taking a short break again. Sakile, are we there? Is everybody there?
We are here.
We're here. Oh, thank God. Okay. If we're all here, then allow me maybe to just hijack the program from here and maybe move us to the next item on the program. And I'm very excited about what I've picked up so far from the speakers we've had. Thank you to all of them for sharing so much. I am now going to take over the thematic areas, which is a very exciting discussion that I anticipate we're going to have. And I would like to check if it's okay. I want to introduce the Director, Strategy and Economic Regulation at Eswatini Communication Commission, that I know so well in the industry. Over 15 years, I know that she has been such a critical component of what we go through as regulation, and I think also we can just say regulatory in the Eswatini Commission, who is going to deliver a paper on the data track. And this is going to provide us a discussion on the fundamental challenge of ensuring that benefits of data revolution contribute to inclusive economic development while protecting the rights of people. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Mage Lindiwe Dlamini.
Good morning, all. It is interesting that we're forced to test our network connectivity. But I feel that this has come at an opportune time to check if what we are doing is real. My data in data being gold. In fact, itself, internet is actually made out of, without data, there would be no internet. The internet comprises of group that are by the various of the internet now. Thus, introduce government. Otherwise, if it is, then we are like maybe.
Sorry, Ms. Dlamini. Can I interrupt you just a second? I just want to check if it is you or me, and everybody else can hear you. You seem to be breaking here and there.
You are also.
I'm also breaking.
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so it's me.
I don't know.
No, I think it's Lindy because Nemo is not breaking. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So can we sort that out on your end?
Yes, I think Nogotula will attend to it shortly. I have alerted her.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ngosi. And while we wait, just to recap a bit, we are going to have at least 4 thematic areas that we have lined up some very good speakers to present their papers on. While Mage Dlamini is going to give us on data, we are also going to have, I think one that I'm looking forward to as well is the environment area, as well as inclusion. And I think the other one that you must not miss is around the area of trust. So it's going to be very interesting to find out the thoughts of these key speakers in these thematic areas. But yes, just to recap on the introduction that Ms. Dlamini made, this is a very good test for our internet and internet capability and how far we have come and where we are in terms of the use of internet, flexibility of our internet, accessibility as well. So we are not far off from seeing how much progress the country has made in this area. So, Ms. Dlamini, are we back yet?
I hope I am, Mr. Bingo.
Okay, excellent. You have the floor.
You can all hear me.
It's very perfect now.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, thank you. Once again, a warm welcome to all the participants, and thank you for having me as part of this forum. It has been a very exciting morning. Well, earlier on, when I started, I spoke to the fact that the internet is actually data that is grouped in a certain way, and that makes it possible for different users to access it, to consume it for their various needs. When you look at, it is proposed that by the year 2030, data collection and analysis will become the basis for all future service offerings and business models. There's an adage or a saying that is being used nowadays, which says that data is the new gold. Well, what that really speaks to is the fact that going forward, the insights that we get from data is what most businesses are going to use. Everyone are going to use when they put across programs or they plan programs that will be used for their planning on what it is that is going to be done. The use of data can foster collaboration, create real-time solutions to challenges in agriculture, health, transportation, and this will increase the interaction between government, citizens, and the business sector, serving to promote greater openness, and it will usher a new era of policy and decision-making. I think what has been happening and what has been alluded to this morning is the issues of transparency, because what has been going on is not that somebody was trying to hide anything from anyone. It's just that each and every one of us has been working in their silos, in their areas of concern, and not really coming together for us to collaborate and collectively formulate policies in order to enhance our products or projects or anything that we are planning as for the citizenry. So this era of data is saying that when the data is there available and collected in fully, then we will all be able to use that data in order to complement our service provision. The unfortunate thing that is happening for now is the fact that you find that I have data, maybe let me see, through the Vela program that we undertook, and the central bank has data that comes from KYC, and this data would be speaking about the same profile, the same person, but we cannot share the data effectively in order to ensure that we all have similar data and we can use those resources to say, I don't need to recollect data that already exists somewhere. But the time has come for us to now rethink what it is that we do with the data that we have. Another case in point is the fact that when you go to the public sector, when you go to government, we all know that the Ministry of Home Affairs is the collector of data when it comes to people's personal information. But you often find that that data is not utilized in other areas. There has been no connectivity or full connection with other entities to ensure that the same data that exists in Home Affairs can be used for other processes or planning or whatever programs that we need to develop for our citizenry. The COVID-19 scenario has actually brought those to the fore, because now we need to know where people are, and we need to understand better the profiles of people when it comes to issues of health and issues of whatever else that people may need and require government to assist with. But what is happening is that at the is used in order to govern the country. Apparently, I'm gone.
Yeah. Yes, carry on. Let's see if you can come up continuously.
I don't know whether it's attesting to the issue I alluded to, which is saying that this whole COVID-19 is testing our networks, our robustness, and how strong the networks are. Maybe at the end of this session, that is one recommendation that we can make, to say we need to ensure that this is now more stable. But maybe let me
Yes.
continue to say that many countries are not aware of how to maximize the use of this commodity, which is data. The countries that have incorporated the use of data analytics, for instance, have already started to see the transformation in not only information technologies, but also in every business and industry. Eswatini has not taken advantage of the use of data, nor the data-driven technologies to make systems and processes that will be more efficient for the delivery of services to the consumer. I have already spoken to the issues of KYC and other government systems wherein data is collected. The consumer is expected to produce a certified copy of their ID or a copy of their birth certificate everywhere they go, where they are asking for a service. And yet that information is already sitting somewhere because my ID is not going to change. It is a lifetime thing. So what we need to do is to now look at saying, how are we going to ensure that we bring together that information so that the consumer produces the certificate once or the ID once, and it is available wherever they need service. This could be avoided by allowing the public authority system to query the government system. There are, however, initiatives that the government has put in place that harness this power on open data. For instance, we have the Ministry of Health, which is now connected to the Ministry of Home Affairs. When you go to a public clinic and you produce your ID, there is a way of recalling your entire data such that they know exactly who this is. And there is a history of other contacts that you have had with the health system. This needs to be rolled out, and it needs now to include the private sector as well, so that it minimizes the needs for special documents that are still trying to prove that I am who I say I am. There are some cases that were experienced, especially when we were doing VELA. I will refer to VELA because that is one of the biggest programs that included everyone who has a mobile phone, wherein you find that people, there are some services that are not available in the country, but they are required by some of the service provisioning entities. In Eswatini, we have issues with residential addresses and all that, because my residential address, I could rightly say that that is where you will find my house. And then if for some reason isihlahla seMaganu has been cut down or wind has blown it away, then it means I don't have an address. Those things change. But if we have a robust data, a data set that will identify a person, it may not be necessary to keep on going to all these, to all means of trying to find that. I'm aware that we need to now go and look at the issue of addressing and all that. But for now, when we have not gotten there, what do we have that we can use in order to ensure that it is easy to identify a person and where they are and what their needs are? When it comes to the issue of governments, there's a need to carefully craft systems and policies to ensure that the country's data resources are used productively with a minimum waste and misuse, and they're made available to business and entrepreneurs in a fair and competitive environment. The key challenge is to carefully implement policies that enable innovation and growth while safeguarding against practices that are harmful to individuals, especially the most vulnerable members of society. It is good, or it is worth noting that as Mr. Dlamini earlier, or Mr. Dlamini Andreas earlier on mentioned, that there is a bill that specifically is going to look at data protection. It is the Data Protection Bill of 2020, wherein Part 3 of the bill addresses the issues of protection of personal information. And I do believe that most of the questions that come about when you speak to the issue of data is, how much am I going to be protected once I have given my data to the state or to the organization wherein the data is required? maybe a little bit of comfort will come from the fact that this bill addresses those issues wherein it talks about how your data can be used and who can use your data. And it also speaks to issues of how you'll be protected as an individual whilst your data has been collected and it's stored somewhere. Then there's the other element. We are quick to criticize government, to say once government has my information, then government can abuse the information and use it for other issues that are not what it was collected for. Be that as it may, yes, if a data collector collects your data, they need to clearly specify what the data is going to be used for. And in case where there's deviation, it is important for you to be notified or your permission be asked for, so that you know that your information is going to be used by somebody else. Unfortunately, this is one area where we fall short. This is not only government, but it also applies to the private sector. Oftentimes when you enlist or you register to participate in a certain service or product or whatever, you are then asked to put in your details, and then there's this thing of saying, do you allow us to contact you in future for other services? Unfortunately, what we normally do is we click yes when we're in the rush to get that particular service that we're applying for, without taking care of appreciating what the consequences of that accent means. We need to now start being personally responsible for our data. Many a times we have had issues of our identity being stolen and so many violations taking place. And this has been as a result of us not being vigilant when we enlist or we sign up for certain services on the internet. We just give our data freely. They ask for your date of birth. They ask for all sorts of information, other information that you do not understand what is the relationship between the product or service that you're applying for and the data that they're asking for. But because we do not take time to consider that, we just fill it in and then it goes. And then when at a later date, when we now become flooded with marketing information and other issues, we then complain and say, how is government safeguarding us against data predators and all that? So I think as much as the government is doing a lot, especially with the bill that will soon become into law, we do need to be very, very vigilant ourselves on how we participate on the internet. Because once somebody goes in there, they're on their own. There's nobody who's going to say, stop now, because now you are getting into a danger area. I am encouraged by what the Bankers Association is doing, wherein they are continually educating people or their customers about how to behave when they are online. The only small part that gives me a little bit of discomfort is now when they discourage people from using free Wi-Fi. Maybe it would be good to be specific as to say, when is free Wi-Fi not advisable to be used? Because one of our efforts as the Commission is to provide free Wi-Fi to the public in certain places. And if now there's advocacy for not using free Wi-Fi and saying that it is not safe, then there's going to be a clash, because we do need to increase the availability of Wi-Fi in order for people to access data. But otherwise, the responsibility is dual. It needs to be done on a governance, there needs to be proper governance on the internet. And also, we as individuals, we need to take control of our own data and ensure that you don't give it willy-nilly in order to ensure that you are protected. May I stop there for now, Mr. Moderator?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ngozi, for your insight into a very, I think, controversial issue. I think you've handled it very, very well. I know that we have so much to ask as well, and I have so many questions that I wanted to delve into on this specific topic. Just before you go, and we are running out of time, so I'll give you just maybe 2 minutes on these 1 or 2 questions. You mentioned I think rightly so, the issue of responsibility, the public that has over data use and data collection, but how much are we contributing to the public awareness here, and what is the role of the regulator maybe in terms of ensuring that the public is aware that your information out there leads to a sort of profile somewhere else? And then I think I want to partner that with the issue of AI, artificial intelligence, and other data-driven technologies in the exercise of rights of most vulnerable groups. How do we implement these to further advance their inclusion and avoid harm, specifically for these groups?
Thank you, Mr. Mbingo. Maybe let me start with the role of the regulator. You see, this one is a little bit tricky in the sense that when people go onto the internet, they go there as persons themselves. And some of the areas that they would go into are not necessarily the areas that are regulated by the Commission. So the role of the Commission will be to roll out the policies and the guidelines that will come from the bill once it becomes an act, because our role is to make sure that we implement those and make them available for the public to be aware that they can be, there are safeguards around that. But when it comes to the issue of educating the public, I think that one needs to be done by everyone who posts information on the internet, and anyone who, by the nature of their business, allows people to be a part of the internet by accessing their services. Let me make an example. Every morning, even before I see a physical copy of the newspaper, I go onto the internet and I read the newspaper. That would not need the regulator to educate people on saying, when you do that, this is what you might encounter. So it is important for every service provider who provides services on the internet to adhere to the issues of digital government approaches, wherein you need to ensure that terms and conditions are made available and clear. They are in a language that everybody can appreciate and understand. And also the fact that the information should be layered in such a way that it becomes possible or easy for me to appreciate what is happening here. Unfortunately, what happens now is that where you have privacy policies or governance policies, it is such a huge document itself that if I were to read that, it means that I would not have time to actually do what I wanted to do on the internet. So it is important for everyone to be mindful of how, or maybe not mindful, it is important for everyone who has information on the web or on the internet to be responsible and educate their consumers on what or how you should address or be on the internet, behave on the internet.
Okay.
Yeah, the issue of the AI, I think the Kingdom of Eswatini has not gotten there yet. But I believe that maybe one of my colleagues can respond to that one in full.
Okay. Thank you, Mlangeni. You are a brilliant person. You know when to bring others into the discussion. I think we have a session towards the end of this area. Maybe we will have time to get back onto that question. For now, I would like to introduce the next speaker to to go into the second of our thematic areas, Mr. Eric Sayama, who is the Research and Early Warning Systems Director at the NDMA, which is the National Disaster Management Agency. Babe Sayama is going to speak to us on environment and environmental sustainability and climate action as a fundamental component of the UN 2030 agenda. And since we all know that the internet and information and communication technologies have a powerful impact in the face of this challenge. Mr. Sayama, may I please bring you on to the discussion, and then also just go on to request you to make use of your 7 minutes we are allocating you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mbingo, and thanks, Program Director, and good afternoon to everyone in the meeting. Maybe first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers and the sponsors of this important forum, which is talking to internet governance. And maybe, as you said, Mr. Mbingo, I'll try to be brief and just try to highlight a few, maybe some important issues. So I know that when we're talking about the internet, I'm not sure if I'm audible enough.
Yes, you're fine, Eric. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, at times it's difficult to talk when maybe good speakers have spoken before you. So, but I mean, I'll just maybe raise a few issues about internet. I know that most of the time when we're looking at the internet, we look at the soft issues, or maybe the data and information, like the previous speaker has just spoken about, and we tend to forget about the other issues that relate to the internet. And I mean, as maybe the moderator has rightly introduced me, I can maybe just pose one question to the meeting, like, have you ever wondered how the internet impacts on the environment, which is both the positive impacts and the negative impacts? And probably just to give the light, I know that most of the time we tend to focus on the positives and forget about the negative impact which the internet might have on our environment. And I mean, another question would be, if maybe we think of the internet, looking at the, maybe in relation to climate and climate change or the environment, I wonder if we've, maybe as a forum, have we ever wondered how much carbon emissions are generated each day by an online activity? And I think these are the fundamental questions that we need to sort of maybe think about, and so that we can maybe as we dive into the internet, and maybe as we develop based on internet, development, we can think about and see how best we can mitigate them. Some people, some school of thought, they say that with about 2.5 billion people connected to the internet worldwide, the internet energy carbon footprint is estimated to air travel. And I know that, if you're from the environmental sciences, we know that most of the carbon emissions which lead to greenhouse gas emissions, and maybe the greenhouse gas, the greenhouse warming or the global warming, we find that they're attributed to air travel. And actually, when you look at the air travel, they've even introduced levies so that to compensate for the emissions that are produced. So if you look at the internet, you need to also maybe look at the hardware part, which there's a lot of manufacturing, and there's a lot of production of a lot of carbon, because there's a lot of energy that goes into the production of the computers, the hardware, the wires that maybe some of them are physically connected to the connectivity, the connection, and all these other things. And also maybe, when you look at the storage, the data storage centers, you find that they use this, maybe currently you find that the energy usage is really been brought down, but otherwise, when you look at it, you find that those centers, they use a lot of energy. I remember in maybe 10, 15 years ago, when there were about two supercomputers around the world. I think one was in Japan, maybe one in UK, maybe the third one in the US. I mean, when you looked at those giant computers, you wondered how much how much energy was being consumed at that particular moment when they are processing the information. So, I mean, with that, I'm just maybe trying to highlight the impact of, internet on the environment. Where the environment, it's anything that surrounds us, be it a social environment, the physical environment, and you know that, I mean, some of the issues when you think about them, especially socially, you find that, I mean, with a lot of internet usage, people tend to spend so much time on the internet and even forget about their families, and that creates problems, so socially, and which maybe at a later stage they also maybe manifest to environmental impacts, because when people become like violent because of the problem they have at home. I mean, you find that, I mean, these are, when you look at the sources, you find that the actual source, it is the person using the internet. So if the internet is not used wisely, I mean, it can affect, many aspects of a human environment. Then we've also, I mean, as I alluded earlier on, that, I mean, the amount of energy that is used to producing or powering, the internet, internet systems, you find that there's a lot of energy that goes into that, which leads to a lot of maybe pollution, into the environment or to the atmosphere. And I think, I mean, we're now at this particular moment, we are in COVID, and there was maybe a minimal use of air transport. So I think this particular time, I think most of the people, we tended to use the internet for our business continuities or for our daily activities, but this gives us enough time, I mean, the right time to sort of understand the amount of pollution which the internet can produce at a particular time. Because I think the 5-6 months which we have been in COVID, I mean, most of the emissions, you find that they'll be attributed to internet and internet uses. So, I mean, we know that, I mean, like someone was saying, I mean, we're moving forward, and probably we are developing, and internet, I think it is taken as, the development pathway. So we know that with that way, there's a lot of, emissions that are bound to occur because of the increase of the internet usage in our environment. So we need to think about mitigation strategies, which I think, in a nutshell, for our in our country, we need to understand the country's internet carbon footprints, so that we are able to develop the appropriate mitigation strategies and policies of of the internet on our environment. See, things like, I mean, the thing that we need to think about, it's website hosting in the data center that use the different kinds of energies, and how much data gets transferred when a website is open, I mean, for the in and around the country. So we also need to maybe think of how to promote the green web hosting, because we know that there are some centers, like in the country, find that we host our data outside. I mean, there are a few centers, like maybe Real Image does the hosting of data, in maybe web hosting internally, but find that most companies and individuals, they host their information maybe abroad. So there's also maybe need to raise awareness on internet environment impact and security, and so that we can promote the sustainability. And if you look at our development and our legislation, you find that they probably enacted way before, I mean, the increase in internet usage. So we need to update and review our legislation and regulations so that they address the issues of waste management, especially the e-waste. So, Madam Program Director, I think I was trying to catch, to take everything within the required time. So maybe let me stop there for now.
You are a very good man, Mr. Seyama. Thank you very much. You exceeded by only 1 or 2 minutes now. And because of that, I'll give you just one question as a takeaway. What do you think, therefore, we can, maybe are lessons that you can share with us on how we can improve or prevent this wastage that you're talking about, the carbon emissions, are there any initiatives you can share with us or ways we can look into improving this area specifically?
Thank you, Program Director. Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways that you may want to think about. I mean, one of the key ones, it's we have to come up with good policies. Like, I mean, we know that organizations sometimes you find that they are infrastructure policies find that they need to maybe get new technology maybe once in maybe 3 years or 2 years or so. So I mean, one way if we understand, I mean, the emissions or maybe the amount of emission that we cause by using the internet, we can maybe review our policy so that at least we keep our IT systems longer, so that at least while they are still maybe in a good working order, other than just disposing them and making sure that making always that by buying new ones with whether it's a very high speed. So I think that is one of them. And I wish the key thing here is I think we need to come up with good policies in the country so that we know that the internet is used sustainably and we are not maybe impacting negatively on our environment.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Seyama. May I now move on to our next speaker. Mr. Seyama has already alluded to his company. Mr. Ali Resting, the co-founder and managing director of the Real Image Internet and Eswatini-based internet and solutions provider. Many will know Mr. Resting. Eswatini Internet Services Providers Association, and where he has remained a very active member, using his influence also to lobby for the establishment of independent communications regulator, the Eswatini Commission. I want to ask Mr. Resting to move very quickly also in his presentation on inclusion, and maybe just to share with us on the internet governance community and the issues, challenges, and solutions that can be there for us all. Please welcome Mr. Ali Resting.
Thank you very much, Program Director. A good afternoon to everyone. All protocol observed. It's very different trying to present almost to yourself. So I'll do my best to walk through the presentation that I have, which really speaks to the issues of inclusion. I thought just before I get into this discussion, one needs to try and understand what really is inclusion, but more specifically, digital inclusion. There are many definitions that sit out on the internet. I chose one for I thought it is fairly elaborate and covers most of the scope that we need to think about. It is the process whereby technology such as telephony and the internet is made more accessible to individuals by helping them learn the right skills to take advantage of the tools they need for social and economic integration. You can see just from that definition alone that it is very broad and many aspects need to be addressed when speaking about inclusion. We can also see and pick from that definition that it borders very closely to what we have for many years been speaking to as bridging the digital divide. Bridging this divide will take more than just innovation alone. Just as the issue of connecting the unconnected in itself is only a part resolution of many things that need to be considered. There is a nice term that has been coined when you speak of inclusion, which is REACT. REACT basically spells out rights. That means policies. We need policies in place. We need education. We need access. We need content, more specifically relevant content. And we need to target, that is to identify to whom or which areas do we want to be the benefactors. of this particular inclusion. How do we go about to ensure that web and content is for all? I very recently had an opportunity to listen to a number of talks that deal with inclusion. And there was a nice takeaway that came out of it where they did a global snapshot of the barriers to access and the use of internet. Interestingly, the highest rating of all of this was know-how. Obviously, these would change from country to country, but this is just a global snapshot. So know-how accounted for 34%. Cost was the next one at 16%. Relevance at 14%. Devices, access to smart devices was at 13%. Time 11%, and the balance of that went to infrastructure. So we can see that we need to have processes and systems in place that need to speak to all of these as a collective for us to actually have a truly all-inclusive system that we want to have. Interestingly, for Eswatini, whereas in many other territories that have a drive to connect the unconnected, and these drives in those countries tend to be civil society and private sector led. In Eswatini, it's more government, or let's call it regulator programs under, for example, the Universal Services Fund, which have been driving and trying to meet inclusion. Research around the world has also clearly shown that we need to be very clear in setting our targets within our ICT policies that are very much leaning towards reduction of rates and connecting our people. These targets need to be very, very clear. It was interesting that the Commission undertook a project, I think they started it a few years back, of a price target whereby they wanted to ensure Swaziland would improve in its cost of connectivity, including telephony services like mobile. And it was a program that was run over 3 years. The program at inception had very clear targets of what it wanted to meet. And I am excited to say that, since that program has been in place, we have seen a major reduction in costs over the last 3 years that it has been in place. The other thing that speaks to policy is that, for Swaziland, we are fortunate we have a very great policy in our NICI policy, which is our National Information and Communications Infrastructure Policy. This policy deals with 9 pillars specifically, one of which is regulatory or legal. The other speaks to environment. It speaks to infrastructure development, which basically is equal access for all. It speaks to financial services, to media, human resource capacity, building, education, and ICT industry, including strategic ICT leadership. This is a great starting point. It clearly spells out how it is that we want to go about to meet all of these. Another thing that I've always advocated for time and time again is if we are really to try and make digital inclusion something for our communities, one of the greatest barriers is the cost of ICTs. It's essential ICT and telecoms equipment. We need to do away with importation duties and taxes that relate to ICTs. It is the easiest and quickest way to reduce the cost of these. Because whatever those taxes are, at some point they get passed on to the eventual end user. It is something that we can easily adapt. Some of the leading countries in ICT, for example, Kenya, have introduced a tax or removed taxes on ICTs, which has had a fundamental increase in terms of what they've been doing. The other great thing that I do want to touch on is USOF. USOF is basically the Universal Services Obligation Fund. As I mentioned earlier on, the drive to connect the unconnected, or the drive for more inclusion in Swaziland has been driven through a project predominantly managed under the Eswatini Communications Commission. USOF is basically funded by taking a certain percentage of all our licensed operators to compulsory contribute to that fund each and every year. I just want to highlight the successes of what this project has done. It has got or had a strategy that was implemented in 2018 that runs up until 2021. In the time that it has been there, it has managed to connect 25 health centers in underserviced areas.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Resting.
Yes.
You are on 1 minute, sir.
On 1 minute, I'll try and speed it up.
Okay.
16 Kundla centers, they have provided end user devices support to 21 schools with an average of 45 devices per school. They've provided special needs support for visually impaired, up to 10 of these. The GSM network has been expanded by installing and setting up 6 base stations, predominantly in the Shiselweni area. Magalindi did speak about the public Wi-Fi project where 4 ports of entry have been connected with another expansion aimed at getting into the hospitals and so forth. So there has been great work done, but it would be great to see incentives in place also to get private participation so that we can truly have this inclusion become a reality. I'll leave it there for now, Program Director.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Resting. Thank you for such an insightful presentation as well. Maybe just one more question for you to deal with. Maybe let's just look into how we can better utilize primary and secondary schools and tertiary educational facilities to promote and to deliver on digital literacy to their communities, and should digital literacy be the 4th pillar of education alongside reading, writing, and maths, do you think?
I fully agree. I think the Ministry of Education, this is a subject area that they are closely looking at, especially because of the introduction of challenges that related to COVID. Already there's an understanding that we need to move towards the digitization of our curriculum so that services can be extended to a community at large without needing them to be within closed areas like the schools. The schools themselves, there is major great projects that are currently underway. I think Mr. Dlamini from EPTC alluded to some of their interventions in that area. Most of our schools are getting actively connected, and one would hope to see that in the next year to 2 years, really a significant majority, as high as 80% of them, should have connectivity. There is great opportunity to unleash digital curricula, to build content that can be used, but not only by the schools, but by the communities that these schools service. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you, Mr. Resting, for that response. I think you've said a lot, very powerful things here, especially on the issue of the cost of ICTs, and I think we will come back to that issue when we're discussing as well data cost and pricing. For now, though, I would like to introduce our 4th and final speaker on the thematic areas, who is going to speak to us on trust. Dr. Andile Metfula, who comes from the University of Eswatini, is a senior lecturer there, as well as the head of computer science department. I know him to have also been very instrumental in setting up the first ICT fair in 2017. Dr. Metfula, welcome, and thank you for joining us for this session. I think that you have the floor on a very, very important issue on the online world.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank all the partners for putting this important forum together. It's very, very important, especially at this time. Program Director, as you've pointed out, I am going to address a very important theme, trust. To understand this, I think it's very important to understand the history of humankind. If you go back to our history as human beings and look at the inventions that have come up, especially in the sciences, especially in engineering, especially in technology, you will discover that we've got inventions that needed men to have trust, mankind to have trust, mankind to have faith in those inventions. I'll take you back, the memory lane program director, to 1903 in the 20th century, the Wright brothers in North Carolina. They came up with the first successful airplane. They came up with that invention. And if you read that history, you will discover that others had failed. So for them to be successful in what they did, they had to work on their invention to such an extent that their fellow men, their fellow men, their fellow citizens in the United States at that time had ended up having trust in what they had developed. So it's not different with what we are dealing with today. If you fast forward to 2020, we now have the internet. We now have this invention that keeps growing. It's much bigger and much bigger than what the Wright brothers had developed. It's bigger because it doesn't just affect us technocrats. It doesn't just affect us professionals. It affects an 85-year-old who is sitting at home as we speak. It affects everybody. So it's different from other inventions. We've said as technocrats, as technocentric people, as people who have faith in technology, we've said that the internet is a tool for development. We've said it's a tool for empowerment. We've said it's a tool for poverty alleviation, for emancipation. But that is us as technocrats. Now, if you want to have this invention to have impact, you want to address the masses, the populace, the masses of our people. Are they viewing it the same way? If you look at Vision 2022, our leaders, their majesties, have said one of the vehicles that will take us to 2022 is ICT. And Mazea, one of the moderators, he said, without the internet, these gadgets are not that important. They're important if they're interconnected, meaning there must be this thing called the internet to make these devices to connect, to communicate with one another. And I do believe, and I do agree that ICT, the internet will take us to 2022. But like anything, program director, like respect, I'll give an example with respect. Trust is earned, respect is earned, it's not given. So for the masses to have faith, to trust this invention, there are things that need to be done. You can't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I now trust this person. There must be things that this person, this particular individual must do in order for you to say you trust them. So what are those things? Maybe before I go to those things, program director, we now have COVID-19. March this year, we experienced something that we've never seen before, something that we now call a lockdown. It started in China. This new normal, we now call it the new normal. It has brought a lot of things that we've never done before. Banking, most of our banking, we now do it online. Teaching and learning, like here at the university, is now supposed to be done online. Meetings, forums, if you look at this forum, if you can ask attendees in this forum, when last did you attend a meeting where you had 30, 40 people in the room? And they will tell you that probably before the lockdown, probably before March. And that says there is a lot that needs to be done as far as trust is concerned on the internet. Now, there are things that need to be done, program director, to earn this trust, just like respect, because it's not given. It's something that you earn. It's something that you work for. First is the issue around security. The people that we are inviting to these forums, the people that we are inviting to the internet, are they going to be safe? Are they going to be secure when they use these platforms? Issues around stability. If you go to academic institutions right now, you've got professors who are around 60 of age. They've never used the internet before. You say to them, "Sir, please start using the internet to teach." And when this person now is trying to upload his slides, his lectures, the internet is not there. I'm talking about the issue of stability. So the first one is security. Are our people going to be safe? Are they going to be secure when they use the internet? The second thing is stability. Is it going to be stable? Is it going to be available at all times? Because with the new normal, we cannot live without the internet. I think it's Ms. Numal who mentioned the fact that the internet is now our way of life. We can't live without the internet. The other thing, it's accessibility. If I live at Lavomesa, am I going to be able to access this new invention, this invention that we are promoting? Because the issue of accessibility is also important for banking. If you say I must do most of my banking now online, is it going to be accessible? Is it am I going to be able to get it at Matsamo, up north in Pixpic, Lavomesa, and in other places, parts of the country? The other one is affordability. And then you also look at things like robustness, the resilience. And then the other issue, which I'm glad our government has taken up, is the issue of awareness. When you raise awareness and you want to build trust, you want to build transparency, you have to highlight the beauty, the advantages of the internet. And at the same time, you also have to mention to the people the dangers that may come with abusing the internet. I'm talking about things like cyber attacks, threats, cyber fraud, deep fakes, child pornography, and all these other things. Margaret Dlamini mentioned a very important issue of identity theft. Those are the things that we need to highlight to the populace, to the masses, about the internet, the beauty of the internet, the advantages of the internet, and also the dangers associated with the net. The other one is building capacity. When I talk about building capacity, I'm actually referring to professionals, because it's easy sometimes, especially when you love technology, to think that all professionals are converted, are in the converted bracket, when in actual fact, it's not the case. There is quite a lot that needs to be done to build this trust, even among professionals. I've seen people with 2-3 degrees who do not have faith, who do not have trust in the internet. The other one, program director, which I think is also important, is if you look at accounting. In departments, in companies, in firms, in organizations, they have finance departments. They also have internal audit departments. What those do, they look at what the finance people have done. I believe they are all accountants. But when you look at IT, because we said we now have the new normal, meaning ICT now controls our lives. So that says you cannot just rely on the IT department to do all the work. There must be a cyber security unit that's set up in our organizations that will look at some of these issues, because we are talking about building trust. If you want to build trust, you want to say to people, your money, your data, your information is going to be safe. Hence, us as an organization, we have created this unit that will ensure that you are safe. Just to conclude, Mbingo,
Yes,
I just want to
thank
say
you.
the issue of trust is very important, and it cannot be done by government alone. It will need us in academia, it will need the private sector companies, it will need parastatals, it will need everybody. And to mention that trust is very foundational. Without trust, you will not have usage. Without trust, you will not have adoption. Thank you.
Well done. If we were at a live session, we would have given you a very big round of applause, even for keeping time. Thank you, Dr. Matula, for that presentation. I think I have just managed to stick to the session's allocated time, and I can ask you 2 questions. The first being, of course, one that is very special to me as a practitioner, which is on freedom of expression and public safety. What are the responsibilities of digital platforms, do you think, as well as public authorities in regulating policy on or policing content, and where and how should we balance this? Should this balance be struck between freedom of expression and public safety?
Thank you, Program Director. It's a very tough question. Okay, I think digital platforms, what their responsibility is to make sure that their users are safe, their users are secure, their users are free. But there is always a fine line. I mean, if the material that is being circulated is one that destabilizes things like national security, if it's affecting other people or hurting other people, then we have a problem. So I think digital platforms have that responsibility. I think Michael Dlamini also mentioned the issue of digital literacy, which is very, very, very important. And I think it's something that must be promoted, not just by governments, that is your policymakers, but also by digital platforms to teach their people about these rights. The fact that when you have a right, you also have a responsibility not to circulate stuff or material that will harm other people.
I want to ask a question, Dr. Matula, if you allow me. What kind of collaboration among internet platforms then and media outlets could work to fight disinformation and fake news? I know that we all have experience of fake news online. So how do we work with this one?
Yes, on fake news, thanks, Bingo. It's a very important question. On fake news, one of the things that some organizations have done in the United States, for example, is that they have lessened, or there is now no incentive for circulating or for promoting a story that is not true. So that is one way of discouraging fake news and fake information, especially when it comes from an organization or a media organization. The other one, which is probably close to the work that you do, which is very close to your heart, is promoting investigative journalism. What investigative journalism does, and this research has shown that it does it does deal with fake news. Because if you look at the way investigative journalists do their stories, they go deep into the story, they interview people, they interview both sides of the story if there are 2 or 3 or 4. So investigative journalism can actually do away with fake news. And the other one, which I've just mentioned a few minutes ago, is digital literacy, teaching people about their responsibility when they're on the net, because it's very important. I mean, one of the things that we do in the cybersecurity awareness group is to teach people about the fact that the information that you put out there, maybe if it comes from, even if it comes from an organization or yourself, it's information that will always be there. So before you put it up, ask yourself this question: is it something that you want people to see in 2025, that Andile circulated this in 2020, in July of 2020? So it's responsibility, it's digital literacy, it's investigative journalism, and it's also making sure that there is no incentive for fake news, especially when they come from an organization.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Matula. Very well done. I share and I agree with you fully on your responses there. I think that you've hit the nail on the head, especially on the role of the media in dealing with fake news. It's a very important aspect of our job. I want to move into now our Q&A. Let me navigate myself into the Q&As that have been submitted so far. Firstly, let me just throw this back at Ms. Lindiwe Dlamini. Are you still around? There is a question that has been asked on the price of data as the core of our ability as a country to effectively use the internet. So the question is, what can the director responsible for economic regulation say about this, and what interventions are being done to reduce the cost of data in the country?
Thank you, Mr. Mbingo. Yes, I'm still here. The issue of data is very interesting. When listening to Mr. Resting's presentation, I was greatly encouraged because he did mention some of the initiatives that the Commission has undertaken in order to address the issue of data. Mr. Dlamini earlier on spoke about the issue of us being a landlocked country, wherein we depend on third parties for data. We get it through other countries because we don't have direct access to the sea. I am aware that there are a number of initiatives that the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini, through the Ministry of ICT, using the incumbent landline operator, EPTC, is undertaking in order to ensure that we do have a line that connects us directly to the sea. That may sound like far-fetched, but it's something that is being worked on in order to ensure that we now have data that we get directly from the source and not traversing through the other countries. That's the one thing. We are hopeful that when that project has been completed, it will assist or it will facilitate the initiatives that we are undertaking to reduce the cost of data. What is happening is that as we get data from outside, there's the issue of policy. Policy then says, how does data from outside the country get into the operators' hands for them to be able to sell to the clients? Now we're talking about issues of policy, the legislation, etc., etc. There is an urgent need to address that in order to ensure that whatever initiatives are being done, they bear fruit. Because when you have too many players in between, the middlemen and the middlemen, then the costs escalate and they become higher and higher and higher. So it is important for us to appreciate that. For us to have affordable data, we need to make sure that the legislative instruments allow us to have data that is not layered, because that comes to that brings up the cost. Coming back to achievements or what has been done, I do believe that in the not future, there is going to be an announcement that is going to speak to yet another initiative for the reduction of data. Since 2017, the Commission has been working around the clock to ensure that there is affordable data. So all these initiatives are being implemented piecemeal in order to ensure that we don't come and pronounce one fell swoop reduction of costs and then cause the market to collapse. What we have been doing is incremental, but it is in the sense that when you compare what we used to pay for data in 2016 and what we are paying today, it is down, and it will continue to go down because that's the nature of this industry. It may start high, but eventually it goes down. That has to do with how the whole thing is calculated. But the long and short of it is we are engaged in vigorous data reduction strategies, and it also culminated in the introduction of another operator in order to bring in another competition into the market. It is true that when you have an effective competitive environment, it does benefit the consumer in the sense that costs or tariffs, they go down. That one, there's no gainsaying that. It is a stated fact. So currently we are even reviewing the program that we've been undertaking of reducing the data to see how far we are. And then we're going to formulate new strategies on how to make sure that data is reduced. This is not only done alone. It is working together with all the other initiatives that have been mentioned by various speakers during this session, including Mr. Resting, Mr. Dlamini, Francis, and many, many others, wherein there's a collective effort to reduce data in Eswatini. But all in all, when we calculate how much it costs to provide data, there are scientific models that are brought in to calculate how much it costs. It's not as if somebody wakes up in the morning and says, this is what I want to charge for this. And that is what we as the regulator look out for. Maybe to mention that every product that goes out to the market goes through a regulatory scanning to see how it is structured and how it will impact the market and how that cost that the operator wants to put on that product will affect the consumer out there. So it is work that we're and we're getting there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Ngozi, for that. My quick remark is I wish it a very speedy process to arrive at a certain point where we say data is affordable for everybody. I think the speakers have already mentioned how important it is to all of us now, and especially now that we're in this predicament of COVID-19, it is more than a human right. So hopefully we are not going to take until the end of COVID-19 to work out the modalities of how to reduce data pricing. Okay, I have a question also from Siboniso Vilagati, who is very pleased with Mr. Resting's presentation, and especially on the part of ICTs being very costly and impacting the price or the price of internet and usage in the country. So he says, though, Mr. Resting, if you're still around, what other strategies could we look into to reduce costs other than just cutting out importing from South Africa? What else can we look into?
Thank you, Chair. I think Marit Dlamini has alluded to quite a number of them. The opening up of the markets is one which will trigger quite a lot of reduction in costs. It allows for more players to come in who themselves adopt different strategies to meet operational efficiencies and so forth. I'm very excited that there are reviews of some of our policies where they may have fallen short in the past that allow for a greater participation of on-the-ground players. So policy is a very integral part of it. As Mai Dlamini has said, the Commission has done quite a lot of effort to try and bring down costs as much as they can at this point, which is why some of the initiatives to try and get Swaziland connected straight to some of the undersea cables is underway. That will dramatically reduce costs. So yes, it does need, policy itself needs to align and adopt, but we equally need to have a very clear path that this is where we want to get to. We want Eswatini on the footprint or on the foreground when you speak ICT in Africa. Policy will help us greatly in terms of achieving that.
Okay. Bonga has submitted a very interesting question, and Bonga is asking, in fact, is pointing out that what we are struggling with in terms of internet use is that some of us who are dinosaurs don't have the trust, Dr. Metula, and younger people who have been born in the era of use of internet are very happy to go into the internet and make use of it. And so people who are older are sitting in their offices and working on policies, but they are working on policies with distrust of the internet. What would you say to that? But of course, Bonga is saying we need to do a fast track of adoption of the policies in order to arrive at the point where you are saying we need to trust on the service.
Thanks, Bingo. I think one of the things that is important is not leaving out the young people when crafting these documents. Because right now, the students that I teach are in their early 20s. There are things that they know. I'm almost 40. There are things that they know that I do not know. So it's very important for them to be included in the process. It's very important for them to be part of the process, because these things that we are planning in our policies, we are putting in our policies, will affect them probably long after we are gone. So it's important for them to be part and parcel of the process.
Excellent. I love it. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Matula. I think that makes sense on my end. I don't know about the other speakers. I want to also open the floor maybe to others to ask if they have questions at this point. Mr. Resting, you are saying something?
No, I'm not. I'm not, Chair. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. If there is no further questions, I would like to hand over the reins back to Mr. Sakile Dlamini and take the moment to appreciate all our four speakers on such an important discussion. And well, I think also that they've raised some very, very fundamental points that we need to work on going forward. I have appreciated so much listening in, and I think that we have added value to the discussion. Thank you for having me as part of this session, and I look forward to seeing more change. And also, I think I look out as well on some of the providers to see what is going to happen in terms of how we use the internet and the services thereof. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mbingo. I think you've moderated the session so well. And thank you also to our distinguished presenters who have also shared great insights on the topics that they were provided on. We really appreciate, and we know that this is a starting point also to the next IGF that we shall have, you know, in the future years. We'll be building on this. So we really want to appreciate. One thing I would want to request from the speakers is that I know they've prepared either notes or presentations on this. I will ask that they share this with me so that probably I can be able to, you know, to distribute to the participants here for their benefit. Thank you so much. With those words, I would love to then introduce Mrs. Hannan to help us now with the selection of the multi-stakeholder coordinating committee. I think she will just take only 5 minutes. We are already, you know, outside of the time, but yeah, thank you so much. Mrs. Hannan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hanan Boujami, and I'm a senior expert for learning, policy and regulation, technical assistance of the PRIDA project at the African Union. Thank you, Sakil. Thank you for the invitation to moderate the last session that would set the scene for the next multi-stakeholder advisory group of the National Internet Governance Forum in the Kingdom of Eswatini. It's with privilege that I have the opportunity to present the members of what we call the nominating committee, or the NOMCOM, that would be responsible for choosing the first ever advisory group, and which would qualify the Kingdom of Eswatini to be featured on the global agenda, the United Nations for the IGF. I would like to just set the scene and praise the team that worked on the forum by focusing on all the issues that would eventually place the Kingdom of Eswatini in the global policy map. And I think all the topics that are discussed, from infrastructure, focusing on access, cost, regulatory frameworks, and the balance between security rights of users and safety, and finally data governance, protection, trust, and efficiency, which is the language of the future, are key criteria to make sure the internet in Eswatini is available for everyone, but also to make sure that the kingdom can prosper from the digital transformation and to boost digital economy, and also to be able to be in a strong position as a kingdom to negotiate trade agreements with economic blocs such as the European Union. Now, just quickly, I have a list of distinguished experts from Eswatini who I would like to call upon in this session, and they represent each stakeholder. So the process of the IGF generally is based on what we call the multi-stakeholder approach. The founding member or the nominating committee will have the privilege to choose representatives from each stakeholder that they represent to formulate the group that will be responsible for the agenda of the IGF and its future editions for Eswatini. So without extending in this process, I would like to call on Mr. Ali Restin, who represents the technical community, to be a member of this nominating committee. And then I would call Dr. Andile Mitfula for academia, Mr. Bongani Muduli for civil society, and then I have Mr. Gitswini Faktuzi for the private sector. And last but not least, Mr. Sakile Dlamini from the ministry representing the government. So this team will be responsible for contacting their stakeholders separately to nominate and to formulate the first ever MAG for the IGF of Eswatini. So these people are kindly requested to contact Sakili Dlamini from the government, who will coordinate this process, and then all your selection will go to him directly. So you can all formulate this process. And I think it's with great privilege that I give the go-ahead as an international expert in the subject as well. I'm very pleased to be witnessing this process. And I wish you all the luck, and obviously the team of PRIDA and the African Union will be at your disposal should you need any more help with this process. Sakile, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hanan. Thank you for that, for the intervention you've made. And we welcome also the appointment of the nominating committee. We hope that, yeah, we'll just carry on with the work. We haven't finished, but the work has just started. So thank you so much. I hope that we take the task upon us and we get the country forward, you know, in as far as coordinating future internet governance forums. In fact, nominating people who will be coordinating future internet governance forums. Thank you so much, Hanan. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I would like to then call two speakers to do the final remarks. We have had a successful forum. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to the moderators and rapporteurs, as well as all participants and attendees. I would like now to call upon Mr. Sandro, the team leader of PRIDA, to come forward and make closing remarks. Thereafter, we will welcome Mr. Andreas Dlamini to make closing remarks on behalf of Eswatini. Thank you so much, Mr. Sandro. Your floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So my name is Sandro Bazzanella. So I'm the head of the technical assistance to PRIDA, which so stands for Policy and Regulation Initiative for Digital Africa, and is implemented by the African Union Commission. And on behalf of PRIDA, I would like to congratulate all of you for this exciting first national Internet Governance Forum in Eswatini. And we hope this first multi-stakeholders meeting will be the start of regular and interactive meetings in the coming year in Eswatini. From that national perspective, I would say this is now also an opportunity for Eswatini to interact with other neighboring countries which have already a national IGF. And it's also therefore a good opportunity for Eswatini to attend the coming regional IGF for the SADC region that will take place later this year, and subsequently in October the African IGF. Therefore, I think those discussions that you have started today at national level could be a good starting point to have those regional and consequently continental discussion, and that your contribution also is part of that process. In other words, this first national IGF is a unique opportunity to start multi-stakeholders discussion on the internet, not only in Eswatini, but also a potential contribution to the regional discussion and ultimately to strengthen the African voice in the global debate. And finally, I know that the issue of data privacy and contact tracing in the framework of COVID-19 was highlighted during today's discussions. And I take this opportunity to inform you that PRIDA will soon launch a working group to work on guidelines on this. And we look forward to learn from what is happening in Eswatini, either through joining in the working group or giving input into the draft that will be produced. In the meantime, PRIDA remains committed to support Eswatini in this IGF process, and feel free to contact directly Mr. Mokhtar Yedali and Mr. Adil Suleiman from the African Commission, since we are here to help and support this important process. Thank you very much again, and we look forward to continue this exciting collaboration with all of you.
Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I want to pass special thanks to the PRIDA project, and which includes Andrew Pazzanella, Sandro Pazzanella, Dr. Margaret Nyambura, Mrs. Hanan Pujemi. We are so grateful as the Kingdom of Eswatini for all your inputs that you've put into the preparations for this event, and all the support that you've provided to the Kingdom of Eswatini since Monday, when we started with the IGF, up till today as we inaugurate our national IGF. We are greatly honored, and also special thanks to the European Union, represented by Luis Miguel. We are very much grateful to your support to the PRIDA project in financing it, and actually supporting in all other ways. I want to also pass special thanks to all our presenters, all our moderators and rapporteurs, and also special thanks to Sakile and his team in putting together this wonderful event. We are so happy, and we want to say to everyone that is participating that now the ball is in your court. That is, you now been put in a position where you have to challenge a government, the ministry, in terms of policies that will help guide good conduct on the internet, to help guide the operators, guide everyone who's a player in internet governance, internet service provision, and internet participation. And please, you are all welcome to bring opinions and views to the ministry, to the regulator, and all that are out there. We are there to serve you. And as we have today launched this national IGF, we expect your participation at each and every point when our conveners, the nomination committee that has been announced today is calling us to contribute, participate, come to meetings, you know, and all that. We urge you to be there and support them and support our move towards better internet provision in the country, so that the country can reach its goals and targets and be a developed country as we all wish it to be. So thank you all. Thank you very much. May God bless us all. And goodbye, everybody. Have safe trips back home if you've traveled in some way, but otherwise we are all locked down and we are meeting online. So thank you very much. Thanks, bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Lamin, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.